Hey everyone, just quick announcement before I share today's episode with Kuntal Joisher. Kuntal has such an inspiring story. I can't wait for you guys to get to listen to everything that he's done. I probably could have listened to him talk for hours, so I'm excited for you guys to hear his story and just how inspiring that he is. But I just want to take a minute to share the release of my first children's book of my Healthy Children's Book series called Maddox's Trip to the Chiropractor. It's a cute book with bright pictures that follows a toddler on her trip to the chiropractor. It shows her excitement and how she knows that it impacts her health in a positive way. And each purchase of the book will be supporting a project that I started called the Unlock Wellness Project. For each purchase of the book, we will be donating a wellness bag to a child in need. These wellness bags will include non-toxic, chemical-free essentials such as soap, shampoo, toothpaste, a toothbrush, items that a lot of the time children in tough situations don't have access to. We're also going to be shipping wellness bags to flood victims in Houston, Texas, and reaching out to victims of Hurricane Irma and Hurricane Maria as well. You can learn more about the book and the Unlock Wellness Project by going to drcaseyjohnson.com. That's DRKASEY Johnson.com. Click on the Shop tab, then click the Children's Book option. You'll be able to read a short description and even watch a short video with more information. You can also purchase the book directly on Amazon.com by searching Maddox's Trip to the Chiropractor. But I hope you guys love the book. Be sure to check out my website to learn more, and thank you so much for the support. Now it's time for today's episode. I hope you love my conversation with Kuntal Joisher. Welcome to the Unlock Wellness Podcast. I'm Dr. Casey and excited for today's guest. I'm here with Kuntal Joisher, and Kuntal is the first documented vegan to summit Mount Everest, and he has an amazing story of perseverance, and I'm just excited for him to get to share his story with you guys. So, Kuntal, thank you so much for taking time to come on. I'm really excited to have you.
I'm excited as well, and I'm, looking forward to sharing my story with you. And good that you brought up the point that I'm the first documented vegan. So, I just upfront I want to clarify that Himalayan database and Nepal government, which are currently the only authentic sources of Nepal government and Himalayan database, which are the only authentic sources of who summited Everest and which country. They do not track, any dietary preferences. And
Right.
There have been people, who have claimed, that they have climbed Everest as vegans. And so there's, a whole bunch of this, controversy going on. And it really, just to give rest to the controversy, just one thing that I want to tell you is, look, I really don't care if I'm the first, the second, the third, or the 1,000th or the 5,000 vegan to climb Mount Everest. I'm just glad that I climbed Everest as a very passionate vegan, and I'm back home safe in one piece. I did not die on that mountain. And, that I want to, I have spent all this time trying to tell people that, hey, look, this diet has absolutely no problems whatsoever. And, when I got to the top of the world, I, sort of just wanted to answer that question. People constantly ask me, where do I get my proteins from? Where do I get my calcium from? Okay, look, guys, if I can climb to the very top of Mount Everest, which is possibly one of the most difficult physical endeavors that a human can, do, then I must be getting my proteins and my calcium from somewhere.
You must be doing okay.
Yeah.
Kuntal, let me let's back it up a little bit, because I want to hear a little bit about your backstory, just how your health and wellness was growing up, and how what led you along your path to even become vegan, but also what led you to want to even climb Everest in the first place. So kind of walk me through both of those things. I'm sure they kind of mix together, and just walk me through how that whole process even happened.
Right. So I was born in a vegetarian family, but it's not like I was a vegetarian by choice. I was just vegetarian by religion, because several of us in India are. And I really didn't question any of my choices. My parents said, hey, we eat this and, we are superior to non-vegetarians. We are like elite people. And that kind of thinking my parents put in my head. And okay, that's how I was for 21 years. And then I showed up in United States to do my master's. And I had a roommate who was an ethical vegetarian. And I would go to a grocery store and I would sometimes, buy an ice cream with an egg in it, and I would buy a leather belt and I would wear leather shoes, and he would question all my choices. He would like, okay, you tell that you are a vegetarian and you are a compassionate person, but you are drinking milk, you are, eating eggs, and you are wearing leather. And I'm like, I always thought that milk or leather or, these things, no animals are harmed or no animals are like really killed. And then he started exposing me to all the horrors of the dairy and the egg and the leather industry. And the moment I connected the dots that a glass of milk is pretty much equivalent to a piece of beef, like there is possibly more suffering actually in a glass of milk than a piece of beef. When I connected those dots, I was like, oh God, this is horrendous. For all my life I've been thinking I'm a compassionate person, and now it's just suddenly dawned on me that I am no different. And it's not even just about being no different, but I thought I want to be a compassionate person. I want to be compassionate towards my fellow non-human animals.
Right. And you just don't know, we have these blinders up, and it's hidden to, to the general public, because I mean, most people don't want to watch those kind of videos because it's hard to watch, but I mean, it's happening. So you have to kind of, somewhat kind of suck it up to see what's happening out there and just watch it, because it's like, it is awful what's going on.
Absolutely. You just have, and most people have really trouble watching these cruelty videos. But for me, it just took one video and I said, okay, this is what I'm done. I'm going vegan. So this was back in late 2002. And I decided to go vegan, and I just took everything that was in my home, all the food, all my clothing, all my, even my toothpaste, even my shampoo, even my soap. I just figured out everything that was non-vegan in my home. I started replacing everything with a vegan version. And sure, the first 6-7 months were a little tricky because, I just didn't have a lot of support, or I didn't know any other vegans. So it was tricky. But every time, I would say, hey, maybe I was, just struggling. I would think about the struggle of the billions of animals that are slaughtered every year for food and, clothing and recreation. And I said, look, my suffering is nothing compared to the suffering of these animals.
Right. And it was harder to get the resources back then. Like it's a lot easier now, obviously, with the internet and all the documentaries and stuff. And I mean, you didn't have as many resources and movies and books and obviously the internet to help guide you and inform communities, even when you don't have the support in person. It makes a really big difference.
Right. And but actually, just going back to it, there was a lot of support. Like if you're living in a place like Los Angeles, and I was living in Santa Monica, there were vegan restaurants all around me. There was Whole Foods. There was just all sorts of vegan things available around me. I just had to make that effort. And I was able to make that effort because I was committed to the cause. And that's what I'll tell people. If you are committed to the cause, you will do it. You'll figure out a way.
Right. No, I love that. So you started to, transition to that. How did it, I know you made that choice based on an ethical decision, but how were you feeling physically as well? Did you start to have increased energy, and that made you more active and gradually took you into climbing, or how did that all kind of mix in?
Actually, with most people, when they go vegan, they actually start becoming healthier and they start getting more energy. For me, that did not happen, because even though I turned into a vegan, I was really an unhealthy vegan. I ate a lot of vegan junk food, and I would always overeat and a whole bunch of these things. And anyways, even after doing all that, I went from 110 kgs to 78 kgs. That is, I lost almost 32 kilos, even after eating super unhealthy and, overeating all the time. And I was still shedding weight constantly. But then I decided to move to India. And once I moved to India, it just became a little harder. My journey became a little harder. Even though most people in the world have this notion that India is a vegetarian country, India is actually not a vegetarian country. India is the biggest non-vegetarian country on the planet.
Really?
Yes, it is. Because of sheer our population is so huge. And when I came home and I told them about vegan, they were like, have you gone mad? our gods have told us that we should be, drinking dairy and we should be eating, all the dairy products. And it was just harder to convince them. Anyways, I was vegan. Nothing, once you're an ethical vegan, it's just nothing can, change your mind about, going back to not being a vegan. So for me, it was a fairly easy journey. But what happened is that I just started eating a lot more unhealthy, like, a lot of deep fried food and just a lot of unhealthy food. And I went and I became a sedentary person again, because when I was in the United States, I was cycling to work. I was living near the beach. So I would always be, going to the beach and, running or doing something. And so I was always, I was not that fit, but I would, I was not like really unhealthy. And then in India, I was a sedentary. I was, sitting on a desk and looking at a computer all day long and just eating bad food. And suddenly, from all the way from 78, I became 107 again. So this is, I gained all that 30 kilos again. And it is during this time that my wife Dipti and I actually decided that we wanted to go to the Himalaya. And the sole goal of the trip was that we wanted to see snow. Dipti, my wife, had never seen snow in her life.
Yep.
And I had seen snow like 20 years ago, because living in Los Angeles, you really don't get to see snow. So I'm like, okay, let's go see some snow. And so both of us ended up in the Himalaya, and in middle of the winter. And for the first 6 days, we saw nothing. And like, we were like really so pissed, what are we doing? Like minus
It's
5,
cold.
minus 10.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cold. We are miserable. We're not enjoying it. And then one of our friends said, hey, why don't you go to this place where you'll see a lot of snow? So, of course, we end up to that place, and we see a lot of snow, but all of that snow is on top of the big mountains. I'm like, look, I want to touch the snow. So the guy who drove us there said, look, this peak that you see, actually there's a drivable road to the very top of that peak. So I'm like, okay, let's drive. So we start driving, and about a kilometer into the drive, we run into almost half feet of snow.
Wow.
So he says, okay, now you have all this snow, go play in the snow and enjoy your, time. So of course, Dipti and I go, we play in the snow, we are playing snow angels, we are building snowmans, we are throwing snowballs at each other. It's just, awesome time. And then I told Dipti, look, we have come this far. Let's just, walk a little further and see what's there. So we started walking. Look, both of us are in no shape to do any hiking or anything. I'm 107. Dipti is really unfit. And we start walking 15 minutes. Then it becomes 30 minutes. It's an hour. I'm so unfit that I'm already wheezing. I'm out of breath.
Yeah, and then the altitude, and you're not used to that.
Right, I'm not used to the altitude. I'm not used to anything. And then 2 hours, 3 hours, I'm pretty sure the driver was like, what's going on? This guy's dead.
Did the driver just leave you? Because
So anyways, we keep hiking, and about 4 hours later, we are exactly on the top of the peak that we saw from, like below the village. And
cool.
If you ask me one point that changed my entire life, it has to be that very moment when I was on top of that peak, because it was so quiet. It was so quiet that I could actually clearly hear my heartbeat. For a second, I was so worried that my wife could hear my heartbeat. I was just scared. And it was just so intense that, back then I was running the India operations of a Los Angeles based company. So I was almost like their director of India operations. And almost like life had become like going through motions, every day 9 to 6, you're just doing the same thing. There's no challenges, there's no excitement. But when I was on top of that mountain, all that future, thinking about the future or worrying about the past or, all that nonsense, it just sort of melted away. Only the current present moment came into focus, and it just felt so crazy. I thought, man, I have to feel like this for the rest of my life.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And I love that, because there's just, you can eliminate all of that noise. And then obviously not just the physical noise of, you're in India, it's so overly populated. Like, I'm sure, like, I can't imagine like that, just that craziness all the time, the busyness, and then obviously the noise from work and everything else. So that's incredible.
Right. So I thought, okay, let's go back home. So we went back home. Our trip was successful. We saw snow. And then I thought, when I go back to work the next day, I will feel exactly like the way how I, felt on the top of that mountain. So I went back, to work, and I did not feel that way. And I said, okay, this is not how I want to live my life. And so I said, okay, I'm going to go back to the mountains. And so a month later, I went back to the mountains, and I felt exactly the same way. And I started going back to the mountains like almost on a weekend basis. I live in Mumbai, and Himalayas is really far from me. But I just started going to the Himalaya on the weekend. I was just so addicted to.
How far was it for you?
I would say about 2,500 kilometers. So long flight, and drive, and I would be in the mountains, and then hike in the weekend for a couple of days, and then take a flight back home. So that's what I was sort of doing for quite a bit. And once you are into the mountain scene, and once you are into the trekking scene in the Himalaya, of course you are going to think about Everest. That's what everyone thinks about. So
Right.
I thought about Everest, and I said, hey, why don't I go to the base camp? It seems like a really reasonable thing to do. So
What's the elevation of the base camp?
The elevation of the base camp is about 18,500 feet or so. So it would have possibly been, one of the biggest hikes I would have done at that point.
How long does it take you to get to the base?
Once you get into Kathmandu, after a couple of days of, shopping and just, preparing, takes about a flight to a place called Lukla. And from there, about 8 days worth of walking, and you are at the base camp.
Gotcha, man. That's insane, but that's amazing though.
Yeah. So I walked all those 8 days, and I'm camped at the base camp. And on one of the evenings, we are all in the dining tent, and I hear my name being shouted, so I'm like, this, every time if someone is shouting your name at the base camp, something's like in amiss. So, I quickly run out, and I'm like, what happened? And so the Sherpas are like, Kuntal, look at Everest. And so I turn around and I look at Everest, and, the last rays of sunset are falling on Everest. Every mountain is like, blue or gray in color. And Everest is this, like burning golden in color. It's almost as if someone has lit Everest on fire. Like all that snow is on fire. It is the most craziest mountain scene that I have seen in my entire life. And, like when I saw Everest that way, I was super clear in my mind that this is the mountain that I'm going to climb. This is the dream of my life. This is the calling of my life. And I had decided that day that this is it. I'm done. For next few years, I'm just going to be focusing on climbing Everest. And of course, those guys were shouting my name because they wanted me to take a picture of that scene. I was a team photographer. So
it's awesome.
Anyways, I took the picture, and it was all great. And I came back home, and I still remember, I called my boss in Los Angeles, and, I told him, hey, Ron, I would like to quit my job and go climb Everest. And of course, Ron knew, what I was back then. He knew that I was 107. He knew I'm just in no shape to do anything. So like he paused for a second, and he said, Kuntal, what I think you should actually try climbing the moon instead.
So, I mean, he thought you were crazy then.
Everyone thought I was crazy.
Yeah.
Anyone I told, like, look, my like 100 years of my ancestors, no one has even climbed one floor in a building. It's just, and going from there to, a guy in my, like me in my family saying, hey, I'm going to climb Mount Everest. People were like, what kind of drugs is this guy doing?
Right. No, first you're vegan, and now you're climbing Everest. Like, what does your wife think? Because I mean, she had that experience with you climbing that first mountain. So was she kind of like more understanding because she understood that feeling?
I think she was very miserable on the top of that mountain.
Was she?
I think she's like, let's just go home. What are we doing here? I'm not getting any feeling that you are getting.
Right.
So, she also, I mean, I think she has been very supportive. Without her support and without the kind of sacrifices that she has made in last 8 years, I absolutely do not think that I would have stood on top of the world. And so I think, but possibly initially she may have also thought that, hey, this guy is crazy. I've just gotten married to this guy, and now he's saying he's going to climb Mount Everest. What's happening to him? What's happened? But yeah, I mean, I knew that most of my friends know me as the guy who, will take up a project and will, finish it in, leave it in 6 months and maybe not complete it. And they said that to me about my veganism. But the moment I took up veganism, after that, any issue that I have become passionate about, I have not left. So that is what veganism did to my life. that, it taught me that once you take a stand for a certain issue, that you cannot, back off. You have to see the project through. You have to see the cause through. And that's why I'm a vegan still. And that's why I'm still a mountaineer. And I still stand up for the causes I believe in. And that only started with veganism. And that's what I credit veganism for, that it's a cause that changed my entire life.
Right. And I mean, it's really led you to help figure out what you're really passionate about, and what that felt like. Because I think, like, whenever you find out what you really are passionate about, it's easier to complete, and like all of the hard work is easier because you love it and it's the right thing and you feel that momentum.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is, like, I really want to take some time and, address this point. Because I'll tell you, back when I, passed my 12th grade, all of my friends were, said, hey, we want to become engineers. And I said, okay, my friends are becoming engineers, I should also become an engineer. And after we all became engineers, all my friends said, hey, we want to go to United States to pursue our master's degree. So I said, great, my friends are going, I should also go. Then my friends got the jobs. So I said, okay, I need to get a job in a startup, or I need to get a job in the United States. They were all getting promotions. They were all making all this money. And I'm like, okay, I just need to do the same thing. And for a significant part of my life, I did not find what my dream or what my Everest was. And I spent living someone else's dream. It was not until 2009 when I actually found my Everest that my entire life changed. For the first time in my life, I actually had razor sharp focus. I actually enjoyed what I was doing, and I lived every day with a sense of purpose. And I still do that today. And something that, I tell everyone, that please spend some time finding what your Everest is. It does not mean that you have to go and climb the Everest, but, find what your Everest is. Everest is just a symbolic thing, what your dream is, what your passion is. And once you find that, you will get a focus, you will get, that passion, and you will get, that sense of purpose. And you'll just enjoy your life a lot more. And this is something I tell people. Like, so many of my friends at 37, they have kids and, they have jobs and they are making tons of more money than I can even imagine. But they have no clue what their Everest is. And I'm like, guys, you're 37, it's not too late.
It's not. I mean, you're still so young. And like, I mean, in the grand scheme of, if you're going to 80, 90, 100, like that's not, I mean, you have so much more life to figure out what you love and what you're passionate about. And it's just, it's, people kind of give up too soon, or they give it into these like cultural expectations, which especially, what you were seeing like with your friends and like, being engineers, and that's like that's pushed within like the group that you were with. Cause I mean, especially with like India, I mean, you guys have a lot of pressures to go certain routes, right? Like that's right. Pushed a lot more than it is in other places necessarily are, right?
It is. And, but, now things are changing. Previously, at least when I graduated, the only option I had was either I had to become an engineer or either I had to become a doctor. Mm-hmm. It's not like I could have said that, hey, look, I'm really passionate about art and that really I want to go make art, or that, hey, I'm passionate about music. Those people were very, very few. 99.99% of people just did what was imposed on them. Of course, things have changed since then. The society is changing. There are far more options. Artists, musicians, mountaineers, they are now no longer looked upon as, like mad people or, crazy people, who are just, outlaws and outcasts, doing, these things. So things are changing, but still India is quite big and, a lot of people face this problem.
Yeah, no, that's amazing that it is changing. And Kuntal, just to kind of jump back to your climb, and actually the feat of actually climbing Everest, because it took you 2 attempts, right? So you kind of want to tell me about that?
Right. So, I trained from about 2010 to 2014, and Ron, who I used to work for, I also was working for him at that point. Mm-hmm. And his company, he was the CEO of a company called Call Fire, which is a Los Angeles based company. They actually decided that they are going to sponsor my climb. Like, I still remember Ron telling me that, hey Kuntal, I have seen your transformation journey from, going from 110 kg guy to this super ultra fit guy who is ready to climb Mount Everest. And, I want you to take the flag of call fire and put it on top of the world.
Awesome.
And so I took, I accepted the sponsorship, and I went on my first attempt in 2014. Now, on April 18th, there was a very unfortunate incident on the mountain. 17 Sherpa guides died in the single largest accident on the mountain.
Wow.
And, of course, my knee-jerk reaction was, look, this is Everest. People die all the time. What's the big deal about this? And I still remember my Sherpa team coming back down after 2 hours. And the lead Sherpa literally broke down in front of us. He was like literally crying. And he said, while coming back down, we were literally walking on top of the dead bodies of our friends, our family members. And, if our team was even about 5 minutes late, there is a good chance that we would also have been in the accident and we would also have not come back. And he was, talking about what would have happened to my parents, my kids, my wife, who would have taken care of them. And suddenly the gravity of the situation just hit me. And I said, how insensitive I am being about this whole thing. I'm just so selfish that I'm thinking about only my climb. There's such a big issue on hand that the mountain is risky this year. Possibly global warming is impacting it. And there's just so many things going on. Is it even smart to climb this year? Anyways, a week later, after a lot of, back and forth between the agencies and between the Sherpas, between the Nepal government, it was decided that the climb was going to be cancelled for all the expeditions on the south side of the mountain. And consequently, we all came home. For me, it was like, okay, sure, a lot of people have to make multiple attempts. And, I will also train hard and I will go back to the mountain far
You'll be
fitter.
even more prepared too.
Right. I still remember one of my earlier mentors in terms of physical fitness. He told me that, Kuntal, Everest is going to be the biggest project of your life. And for the biggest project of your life, you want to be over-prepared rather than under-prepared.
Right.
And that's the mentality I've always had now in life with anything I do. I just want to be over-prepared and not under-prepared. So, I just put another year of training and I said, let's just go to climb Everest again in 2015. Now, I show up on the mountain, and let me tell you, Everest is not something that you can just show up and say, hey, I'm going to climb it next day. That's not how Everest is climbed. Everest is climbed in stages. The stage 1 is where you get to the base camp. Stage 2 runs for about 30 to 35 days, where you have to let your bodies acclimatize to the various altitudes on the mountain. Now, the summit of Everest is at 29,000 feet. To your viewers and everyone, I just want to give you a perspective. The next time you are flying an airplane and you look out the window, that's the height I have actually been physically at.
That's so crazy.
It's just a different ball game altogether.
Right.
So it takes a while for your body to adjust, go through the acclimatization process. And once that is done, you are ready to climb Everest in one shot from the base camp to summit, like, base camp to camp 1, camp 2, camp 3, 4, 5, and, to the summit. So it's almost like a 65-day process.
That's incredible. Yeah, I didn't realize that you had to get used to the climate for the 30-day. Like I didn't know that. That's amazing. So like, I mean, what was that like? I mean, obviously you're prepared as far as supplies and like staying warm, because I mean, you're used to Mumbai, so you're not used to all of the cold. I mean, were you like staying in a freezer like to prepare for that? Like, how do you get used to that type of temperature to stay there?
So the way I tackle cold, this is something, this question I get a lot, and I tell people that the way to tackle cold, there are 3 things that you have to do. The most 3 important things that you have to do. The first thing is that you need to understand how to how to get your clothing right. There is a concept of layering where you put multiple layers on your body. So you have to, understand how to, buy the appropriate clothing, buy the appropriate gear that, would work on Everest. So clothing is one piece. The second piece is just mentally getting adapted to the cold, because a lot of times, for example, I am in Bombay. I'm always in 35 degrees Celsius. Now, if someone puts me in 0 degrees Celsius, I'm just going to feel cold. But if I take someone from Alaska and put them in 0 degrees Celsius, they are going to say, hey, this is okay. I'm fine with this.
Right.
So it's just a question of how do you mentally adapt to the cold. So what I did is I ended up doing a lot of Himalayan expeditions in the run up to my climb. And I did a lot of these Himalayan expeditions in the Himalayan winters, where temperatures easily go down to minus 40 Fahrenheit. That is some insane temperatures that I have faced. And so, that's where I went and I did all my training. So I was ready mentally that, to face all that cold. Um, and third thing is, of course, that you have to keep feeding your body nutrition, because the way your body maintains temperature at 38.7 degrees Celsius is by burning food or by burning fuel. That's how, it's maintaining the temperature. So if you are not going to eat enough food, you are going to feel cold at some point. So one of the things I also taught myself is, even if I go at really high altitudes, I have to keep feeding myself something or the other. So, a combination of these three things helped me, face cold and help me battle cold. And I did not have any cold related issues. I don't have a frostbite. I never felt, that cold was going to impact me on the mountain.
Yeah, no, and I think, like you were saying, going in with that mindset that the cold isn't the biggest issue, like that's super important, I'm sure, to always have. So, so you were telling me about 2015, so we'll jump back in. Sorry about that.
Right. So 2015, stage 1 was complete. Stage 2 was half done. Still remember, it was April 25th. We were sitting in the base camp. We were inside the dining tent, and my chair was shaking a little bit. Now, started shaking a little bit, or I should say. Now, I have lived in California. I have been part of 3.8, 3.9 magnitude earthquakes where, like literally, if you're in a high rise, the building is shaking and you realize, okay, this is an earthquake. You suddenly run down. The moment my chair started shaking, I was very clear, this looks like an earthquake. I told my friends, hey, look, this is an earthquake. We should, take some action. And they're like, you are altitude sick, you are hallucinating, those kind of things. And of course, 5 seconds later, the earthquake is, in full flow. It's completely intense. And everyone knows now it's an earthquake because everything is shaking.
Yeah.
So all of us run out. We are standing on the glacier. Now, Everest is a 1.5 kilometer long glacier. It's almost like a tent city. There are 1,200 people living on this glacier during the climbing season. The climbers, Sherpas, support staff, cooks, everyone. And entire base camp was out. Everyone was out of their tents. Imagine standing on a giant swing that is swaying from one end to the next. That's how gigantic this earthquake was. It was a 7.9 magnitude earthquake that had hit Nepal, and we were right in the middle of it. A lot of people think that earthquakes go on for 10, 15 seconds, which is, yes, that is true. But as far as I remember, our earthquake went on for easily about 80 seconds. And we were like literally terrified, as to what's, going to happen.
Right. Because I mean, it's different in California. You're not on top of a mountain. It's just the whole magnitude of the situation is just like crazy.
Right. So we're right here in the glacier thinking, okay, this kind of an earthquake can really do some damage. Like it can, possibly send an entire mountain face tumbling down. And we were just worried. And then, of course, we heard this loud boom, almost as if a gigantic bomb blast had happened somewhere. And we can't see anything because there's a low cloud that had set in at, the base camp. So you really can't see any peaks, but you can hear this huge noise, and an avalanche is coming from somewhere. You can't see the avalanche. So you're like, stuck thinking what's going to happen. And the voice is coming from the east. So you are, of course, looking at Everest and thinking, okay, that's where the voice is coming from. So, trying to take an evasive action if something comes your way. At the back of your mind, you're also thinking, in 75 years of Everest climbing history, no avalanche has ever hit the base camp. So, at the back of your mind, you also feel that you are invincible, like you can't die. That's not possible. And then suddenly in front of us, there are all these people who start running towards Everest. So I'm thinking, okay, if the people are running towards the danger, it does not make any sense. Why would people run towards the danger? That's when I realized, danger is behind us, not in front of us. Our entire team turned around and there's this gigantic avalanche. I mean, imagine looking at the left of the sky to the right of the sky. The whole sky is just filled with this, avalanche. And it's almost as if, I was not like scared or anything, but just in that moment, my heart just sunk. I mean, I didn't think that I was going to die. I was actually very certain I was going to die. I mean, I actually just wanted to cry out loudly, and I didn't want to die. There's so many things to do in life, and we couldn't do anything. So, anyways, it was just 3 seconds away, and all in that moment, you're just so much in panic. You don't know what you're doing. We just ran and we hid behind a tent. We didn't even go inside the tent. We just hid behind the tent.
Yeah.
As if, that plastic, was going to save us from
right.
this kind
a
of
small little tent. Right.
Yeah. Anyways, the avalanche hit us. And my initial hunch was that we'll be buried under a meter of snow or something.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll choke and die in a few minutes. And I'm like, I was ready for that. 10 seconds later, I see my body and it's only covered with about 2 inches of snow. And I'm like, whoa, I think I'm going to make out of this whole thing alive. And then suddenly I try to breathe, but I can't suck in any air. Like I'm trying, just nothing is coming in. And I'm like struggling for air. It's almost like someone is choking and killing me. And of course, the guy next to me, a German climber, his name is Jost Kabush. He's a very dear friend of mine. He's seeing all my struggle. And he says, hey, Kuntal, you can come inside my jacket and breathe. So I go inside his jacket and I start breathing. And I'm like, okay, this seems normal. How is this possible? So anyways, I go inside his jacket, I breathe, come out, go in, come out, go in. And this all continues for next 2.5 minutes as the avalanche passes over us. And once the avalanche goes away, all of us stand up and, we do a head count of our team. No one in our team is dead. And then we take a high ground to see, a high vantage point to see what's going on at the base camp. And believe me, it almost seemed as if that entire tent city was just flat. There were no tents left. Everything was just completely devastated.
Wow.
And we quickly went to the medical tent, and we realized that initial estimates were about 21 people dead and about 100 injured. Almost looked like a war zone kind of a feeling. And people with, broken arms and, dead bodies coming in on stretchers. And it was just a mess. The tent itself was completely destroyed. The doctors there at the base camp were doing whatever they could. And then we had a satellite phone. All the cell phone towers were down. So we used a satellite phone to make a phone call to Kathmandu. Luckily, we got through. And we realized that 10,000 people are dead already around the areas of Kathmandu. And suddenly, it hit us that this is no longer an Everest tragedy. This is like huge. This is a tragedy of unprecedented levels. This is a humanitarian crisis in Nepal. And anyway, so just to give you a little bit of a background, what had happened, the earthquake had induced an avalanche on a mountain that was diagonally opposite of Everest. And it was not the avalanche that hit the base camp, but when the avalanche hit the ground, it was so huge that it actually caused a shockwave that ripped the base camp apart. And it was a shockwave that actually came towards us. Most of the injuries or deaths were all trauma injuries. Essentially, people just getting thrown off and, half a kilometer or kilometer inside the ice field and tumbling over rocks. And those are the kind of deaths that happened. And what had happened is when the shockwave happened, the voice of the shockwave was echoing from Everest, which is why a lot of us got confused and we were looking towards Everest.
Yeah, so you didn't know where it was coming from. I mean, that's crazy, Kuntal. Like, I mean, going through like 2 pretty traumatic experiences, you're trying to climb Everest. Both times have been like, I mean, it's like the worst luck ever. I mean, that's just crazy. So like, where's your mindset? I mean, people I'm sure are being like, hey, you should just stop because this is crazy. Like, where's your mind at? Because I mean, I know you eventually, you do climb it, you do make it, but like, where was your mind at that time? And how did you work through it to get to like, I'm going to climb this thing? Like, it's crazy.
Right. So we decided to cancel the expedition. It just did not make sense to climb the mountain. And the entire staff and Sherpas wanted to go home. I wanted to go home. We called off the expedition. I was very much willing to wait one inconsequential year. I said, this is nothing. There's just a crisis in Nepal. We need to, focus on that.
Yeah.
So I came home. Of course, there was a lot of, people saying, look, this guy is spending all this money.
Mm-hmm.
He just doesn't have what it takes to climb this mountain. And, just saying, quit, man, this is not for you. We don't do these kind of things. And all of that happened. Vegans can't make it, look, there were 600 people at the base camp who didn't make it. Like, how the hell does veganism even come into this? Anyway, people will always, pick up some, stuff and tell me all these things. But, going back to your point, I was very clear that, climbing Everest is my dream and it is my baby. And I was very clear that I'm not giving up on my dream.
Well, and you didn't fail. I mean, like, it wasn't like you tried and couldn't make it. Like, it was natural disasters that kept you from that. It wasn't you.
Right. So I was very clear. Look, I have not even made an attempt to climb the mountain. Let's make an attempt at least, and then sort of, say that, okay, I'm not ready or, whatever. So I said, I'm going to go back. I'm going to train harder for one another year. And I will go back in 2000 and climb. But at the same time, I also, sat down with my family and all this risk that I'm taking and all this I was doing. So I also promised my family that this will be my last attempt on Everest. Even if I twist an ankle and I have to come home on the day one, I will not go back and climb Everest. I will go and climb other mountains. But I have spent enough time, enough energy trying Everest. It's, time to move on. So I also told myself that it's not the end of the world, because a lot of times, people have these dreams and they chase them and chase them and chase them. And they don't know when to say no. So I think it's also important to possibly, understand when to say no. So for me, third attempt was going to be the last attempt. Anyway, I made it to the mountain. I didn't twist my ankle. My stage 1 was okay. My stage 2 went through completely without any problems. For whatever reason, the people of Nepal were so confident that this year Everest is going to get climbed and nothing's going to happen. And I am like, okay, 2014-17 dead, 2015-21 dead. I don't know where the confidence is coming from, but sure, I will take the confidence. And then of course it was stage 3 and it's the last bit. I am climbing to camp 1, I'm climbing to camp 2, finish everything. I get to camp 4, which is right inside the death zone. And it's 8 o'clock in the night. And my Sherpa Mingma says, Kuntal, let's go. We have to now start climbing for the mountain. And one by one, every team member leaves. And suddenly Mingma and I realize that Mingma is the expedition Sirdar, in the sense he's the Sherpa leader and I'm the civilian team leader. So we realize that between two of us, we don't have any water left. So we're like, okay, let's boil some water. So the team is gone. It's up on the mountain and we took 45 minutes to just boil half a liter of water. So, pack that water. Mingma puts it inside a warm sock in his bag. We start walking and walk. We started at 9 o'clock in the night. And about, if I go into the detail of the story, I think we can go on for hours, but recap what happened that night. But at about 9:15 or so, I was about 10 steps away from standing on the very top of the world. And you know what? A lot of people ask, I have now, done 120 talks on my Everest journey, and every single person asked me, what did you feel on the summit?
Right.
And the moment I saw the summit, it was not an emotion of joy or exhilaration or sadness or anything. I mean, it was just an intense emotion of relief that, thank God, Everest is now out of my life. I've done it. I've finished it. It's just done. I can move on in life. I've spent 8 years of my life climbing this mountain. And I think that emotion just led to a complete emotional breakdown on the mountain. And I just started crying. I don't know what happened, but it's just, tears were just flowing almost like a river. And I just couldn't stop it. I was, asking myself, I'm not like this. Why is this happening to me? Anyways, I kept, walking. I kept walking, the 10 steps, and I'm crying. Finally, I get to the top, and my Sherpa, is like, he realizes it's some problem. So he's like, are you going to die or something? I'm like, no. I'm doing great. And of course, crying on the summit of Everest has its problems, because the summit, the temperatures were minus 40 C and
straight ice.
Yeah, so your tears before even coming out would freeze, and so if you're closing your eyes, they could get frozen, and you could become temporarily blind on the mountain. Lots of problems could happen. So I'm like, what? I can't do all these things. I have to get together.
Cry when you get off the mountain, right?
Yeah, cry when you get off the mountain. So I'm like, take it easy and okay, let's focus. And and then of course I had to take a picture on the mountain because Nepal government really wants your entire face to be seen in the picture. Recently there have been a lot of fake summits and people photoshopping pictures and all sorts of nonsense going on. So I took that picture, and then of course the next thing, I had to put a vegan flag on the top, because I didn't take an India flag. I got a lot of flack and a lot of criticism for that. But look, I tell people, I am an Indian citizen. Just by being there, I represent
Right.
India. I don't need to take my flag everywhere.
Right.
Anyways, I don't want to get into that. But vegan flag was very important for me because, look, I really wanted to send a message to people that, look, let's just get over this debate of, that vegans are weak. Look, if a guy who absolutely has no genetic gift in terms of fitness, in terms of, athleticity or those things, if that guy, by eating vegan food and just by being, very diligent and, training hard, can transform himself and climb Everest, there is absolutely no case against, vegan food being weak or, vegan food being nutrition deficient or those kind of things. So I just wanted to, give out a message loud and clear on the very top of the world. And I took a photo and I think that is what I wanted to do.
Yeah. And I think you did make that message loud and clear. I don't think you can make it any louder than putting it on the top of Everest. That's incredible. And and I love your story, and it's super inspiring, just the way you persevered and like you knew your goal and you went after it. And even though you had the negativity from the, just the doubts and all the obstacles, and I'm super honored that you were, willing to share your story, because it's really incredible.
Not a problem at all.
Yeah. And just a few questions. So you've done all of this. Like, what do you have going on in the future? Like, is there going to be a book soon, or like, do you have anything like that you're working on that you want to share with people?
In terms of book, a lot of people have asked me this question as well, and I'm just very divided. At one point, I think I should really, document a lot of these things that have happened in my life, and I should document closely what I eat. I should document how I trained, just so that I can share this with, a lot of people who are possibly on a similar journey as mine. At the same time, I also think that, okay, I've climbed Everest, I've climbed Manaslu, which is the 8th highest mountain in the world. I've climbed a few more, big mountains in the Himalaya. But at the same time, I don't think, just doing this much merits writing a book. Today, people, just write a book even when they, run an Ironman. And I just don't think, it's, I don't know. I'm just divided. I just feel, I need to do a lot more before I can say that, hey, I have enough valuable material to, share with people. I just don't want to put half-baked, stuff out, in the market. And just because I'm the first, vegan to climb Everest or whatever, I just don't want to take, that kind of advantage of that. I really want to put out some, I want to bring out a book that will actually add some good value to, people's lives. So whenever I'm ready to do that, I'm pretty much sure that I will write a book, because I really enjoy writing. I'm very active on my Facebook page, and I write about my stories. I write about my journey a lot, and I really hope to write a book someday. I just think I'm not ready yet.
I got you. Well, whatever you do, I'm going to be buying it immediately, because I know it'll be incredible. I can't wait to see the whole story just all out there. You were talking about your Facebook page. So what is the best way for people to follow you on social media, whether it's Facebook or Instagram or whatever platforms that you're using? What's the best way for people to follow what you're doing?
Right. So Facebook is definitely the best way to, reach out to me. I have a public profile, and people are, welcome to follow my public profile. On Facebook Messenger, I'm very active. I respond to practically every single message that I've gotten in last 6-7 years.
Awesome.
I do not miss out on that. And I also have, and now, a week ago, I also launched my website, which is www.kuntaljoisher.com. And people can visit that website, get more information about me. I'm, one thing that I'm hoping to put on my website is a page which is called Vegan. And inside that, I want to, write about the vegan food, like accidentally vegan food in India or accidentally vegan food in the world. I want to create a page for vegan gear, because that is one of the biggest questions I get from, aspiring vegan mountaineers is that, hey, how are you managing your gear? How do you replace leather? How do you replace wool? How do you replace silk? How do you replace down? So all sorts of these questions. So I really want to sort of on my website start sharing a lot of this information, because I have all the information sitting there in my head. I just need to sort of put it out somewhere. So I'm hoping to do that on my website.
Yep, I love it. I love it. And that's going to make such a big impact and just help so many people know what they can switch out things for. And no, I love it. And Kuntal, just closing question that I ask every guest. But if you just had one piece of advice for the audience, maybe it was just your biggest takeaway through this entire journey. But like if you just had one thing to put out there to the audience to help, what would it be?
Okay, I'm going to share a short story very quickly.
Go for it.
2015, the day of earthquake, that night, all of us decided that we are going to sleep in turns. We wanted one person to stay awake so that if another earthquake happened, because there were a lot of, aftershocks going on, and if another earthquake created a big avalanche, then we didn't want to die in our sleep. So one person had to stay awake, everyone else would sleep. And that one person would, wake everyone up. So when it was my turn to stay awake, it's almost as if my entire life sort of played in front of me. I don't know if it's happened to you, but it happened to me back then. All these big events of my life, I was, just started thinking about those events. And I quickly realized that, life is short and life is fragile. I had already seen it early in the morning. And I told myself that, if I have any dreams or if I have any passions in life, the right time to follow them is not tomorrow, not the day after, not in 60 years when I have all the retirement money saved, but that right time is actually now. And since that day, I have actually followed that principle religiously. I have followed my passion. And at the same time, when I'm living in a country like India, I also understand that a significant population of my country does not even have an opportunity to dream, because they are just, always in basic matters of life. They are always entangled in basic matters of life. They don't know where their next meal is going to come from. They don't know whether they are going to get a place to sleep in the night. They, don't know whether they are going to have clothes to wear. They're just, struggling with all these basic issues, which is when I realize, that we are living such a privileged life that if we are going to get, constantly, bothered by trivial issues that are bothering our life. Hey, today, my boss said me this, or, this happened to me, or this happened to me. It's all just trivial issues in life that are bogging us down, not letting us, chase our dreams and passions. I think if we as privileged people don't follow our dreams and passions, we are doing disservice to this life, to the opportunity we have gotten. At the same time, I think we also should work to create a better world, to create a better society where everyone has an opportunity to dream and follow their passions. That's the message I want to give to your audience.
That's amazing. I love that. And Kuntal, I could probably talk to you all day, and I probably would if you didn't have a meeting. So, but just thank you so much for taking time to come on. Like I loved having you, and your story is just so incredible. I'm just excited just to share it with everybody. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate you having me on the show.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in to today's episode. I hope you loved my conversation with Kuntal. His story is just amazing and it's just so inspiring. So I'm excited for you guys to follow him on social media and just keep up with everything that he's doing. You can find the social media links and his website that we talked about in the episode in the show notes, but you can also find them on my website as well at drkcjohnson.com. That's DRKASEY Johnson.com. Click on the Listen tab. Then from there, you'll be able to see all of the past guests that have come on the Unlock Wellness podcast, read a little bit about each guest, and be able to click on their social media links, websites, all of that. So all of Kuntal's information can be found on my site as well. If you guys loved today's episode with Kuntal, be sure to jump onto iTunes, subscribe, and write a review. It really helps me out a lot, and I really appreciate all of the feedback and support. And like I spoke about in the intro, also be sure to check out my first children's book of my Healthy Children's Book series called Maddox's Trip to the Chiropractor. Each purchase of the book supports the Unlock Wellness Project, which supplies a wellness bag to a child in need for each book purchased. You can learn more about the book and the Unlock Wellness Project on my website as well at drcaseyjohnson.com. Click on the Shop tab, then choose the children's book option. You'll be able to read a short description and even watch a short video to learn more. If you do purchase the book, be sure to share it on social media using the hashtag UWProject. I'll repost it and give you a shout out on the podcast. But I hope you guys loved the book. Thank you so much for the support, and I hope you loved today's episode. Thank you guys so much for tuning in.